What's up, everyone? It's Books and Looks TV. So today I am going to be discussing the Amazon series STEM. So right off the rip, I was like, this reminds me of Us. And I kind of got confused. I was like, is Jordan Peele like creating another TV show? But when I looked it up, I don't think Jordan Peele had anything to do with it. Maybe it was inspired by him. But either way, I was immediately drawn to the mother on the show. So the mother came off as very defensive. She was darker skinned, slim, and she reminded me of Vanessa Bell Calloway. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they were related, who knows? But immediately the story was pretty interesting. So it focuses on a Black family who was living in Carolina. Of course, they deal with the racism in Carolina. And one of the biggest things happened to be the cat in the bag scene. The cat in the bag scene kind of elevated. So basically there was a neighbor, this like old creepy looking white woman who was constantly like making comments towards the woman's baby. And she seemed like she wanted a baby. It just seemed like she just was up to no good. And so one day she catches the mother, the Black mother in the show by herself. And she pretty much comes into her home and basically says she wants her baby. The mother kind of is like, hell no. And she realizes the woman has like something set up to harm her. And so she basically tries to hide the baby. In the midst of all of that, there's a group of men who come in and gang, the mom. And so while this is going on, unfortunately, the neighbor, she also takes the baby and she basically starts playing this horrendous game, which I believe is referred to as the cat in the bag, and she suffocates the child. The mother, of course, is facing two different types of trauma, seeing her child like breathless and then also being assaulted. And I feel like this is like basically a physical and spiritual attack on the Black family. And this has happened a lot historically to Black women, even in slavery, where people would just try to attack the child, the baby, whatever. And a lot of the Black women would pretty much take their child's life because they didn't want them to endure a life of what they had. And of course, y'all know those other things happen too. So the father comes home and he just notices his wife isn't the same anymore. So as time goes on, the father, he basically decides to move the family to California, Los Angeles to be specific. And he's thinking that they are going to have basically the American dream. I feel like it was very similar to like a lot of Black immigrants who come to the United States, except this family happened to be from the slave South and they moved to the West Coast. And ironically, they found out that it all ain't peaches and cream, and they also have their own racism. I thought this was particularly profound to talk about the Great Migration and just racism in California, because sometimes I feel like a lot of people from different parts of the United States like to highlight that racism is different in different regions. And I feel like it can be different, but that doesn't mean that it's absent. So I thought it was interesting how this show highlighted like institutionalized racism. And one of the first like aims at this was when they were trying to basically get a home loan. Not only did the community not want them there, it showed how like the bank lenders, those involved, really didn't care because they wanted money. And so they would smile in their face, but at the end of the day, they were trying to get a check and they were charging them high interest rates. Automatically, when they move into the neighborhood, though to a lot of people, it's a beautiful home, they're just not very welcome. And so even inside of their home, they're often tormented and just people bother them out of the blue. And so again, the show really focuses on the mother's trauma. And I thought this is, again, very interesting and similar to how the movie Us was, where Lupita Nyong'o's trauma pretty much seemed like a baggage or hindrance to the family. I think that sometimes this is symbolic to like how Black women have like this double identity with misogynoir, and how in general the woman is kind of seen as like the rock of the family, but how everybody can either be blessed in the home or everybody can have a life of hell in the home. And that can stem a lot from the mentality of the mother or wife. And so in this show, the mother, she seems like she's in a better place, but she has these triggers that often disturb things, right? So there's like episodes where she's like combing her child's hair and she drifts off and she burns the child. And you hear like her daughter say she never wants to be crazy like her mother, and not really understanding how her mother got there was really no fault of her own. So her father sees this and he never really blames her. He's just trying to like distract the family sometimes or just basically provide for them. And in a lot of ways, this reminds me of like typical Black masculinity, or how like a lot of, especially old school Black fathers, would typically just work, go home, not really complain. They just kind of saw, well, my job is to exist and the family is happy as long as they have their needs taken care of. And it's not really saying that the father is really totally upset, but when his income is disturbed in the workplace and when he's not really given the recognition he deserves. A lot of people say that the father has demons, right? And maybe he does have demons and or like flaws, whatever. And that could be like the man or the shadow in the background, which seems to me personally like a minstrel. So a lot of people talk about like the mask and costumes that Black people put on, or the double identity when we move into the world, and how we kind of take on the identity of like whiteness or code switching. And so I feel like the father does this in a way where he's very meek and subtle at times. He's like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, moving out of the way, etc. And just trying to be present, but as humble and lowly as possible. So he's not really disturbing the balance. But when he realizes things like there are like maybe parties or promotions or shareholders, sharings in the company, and he's not a part of that, that's when he's disturbed. And I remember a scene where he goes home and he drinks, right? And he's watching TV. And it seems like he's just trying to blow over all of this steam. And then I guess his consciousness or whatever is playing in the background. And they're kind of like, you're going to let this man take food from your child's mouth, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought that was interesting because, again, a lot of the Black people in the show, like they lived outside of Compton, or at least on the other side of Compton. But it was obvious that they were like the only Black family in Compton, and that there was a life outside where most Black people didn't live because maybe they weren't as affluent, or they just chose not to deal with the bullshit. Again, to them, they're like, oh man, you make a lot of money. You know, you living around them, whoop-de-whoop-de-woo, you made it. But he's going through hell. Even though he has money, he still knows he deserves more. And so when he kind of gets that into his head, he goes to try to confront his boss. But of course, he sticks out because he's in a predominantly white neighborhood. He definitely don't live on that side of town or that suburban street. And a white man is kind of like, you know, what's up, boy? You know, how they talk sometimes. And he finally gets tired and he just knocks the hell out of him. And you see, like, even the mother, when she just gets tired, she slaps the shit out of somebody. And so a lot of times some people feel like it could be repercussions, but what do you do when you feel like you have to defend yourself? You fight. So the girls, though, they don't necessarily fight. The oldest daughter, she's going through school, kind of like a shadow. People know she exists, but they try to either mock her subtly or just like make sure she's left alone. There's one girl, and I think I remember something happened to her that made her an outsider, and I can't remember exactly what it is. I'll probably try to find it later, but something happens to her, and a lot of white kids just think she's strange. She kind of makes it like she's doing the daughter a favor, but she don't have any friends either. So it kind of reminds me of a little bit of tokenism, except the girl don't really want to be her friend. So it's not like the daughter is performing at all. She's just hoping that things get better for her in general. And then it's interesting because she finally does confront her and said, why do you hang around me? Why are you telling me I'm pretty for a Black girl? All this little crazy stuff. And the girl, she tries to make it seem like she's genuine. It gives me a lot of white liberal vibes, to be honest, but it is what it is. And the poor, precious little daughter, she kind of has no idea of racism because she's just a little kid, right? She's smaller, you know, the youngest one in the family. But you can tell generational trauma has been passed down to her. There's an episode where she finally goes to school and they tell her to pledge allegiance to the flag. It's obvious a lot of the kids don't want to be her friend, etc. And so me personally, in that scene, I saw that she finally came overwhelmed with racism and just rejection, even though she probably didn't exactly know what it was. And she sees like this shadow or figure outside. Kind of remind me of Jason low-key, not Jason, Michael Myers. And anyway, she gets triggered and she says, cat in the bag, whoop-de-whoop. Remember, that's what happened to her mother. So again, I'm thinking that she's tying all of these things into the trauma of her mother and just noticing how she doesn't really have the happiest, freest life as a Black child. I thought it was interesting because in this show, it kind of shows like, even though they were mobile enough to move to the other side of the country, they still didn't have like total freedom, even though they had like a level of perceived class, etc. The highest level of freedom I really saw in the movie is when the mother would go to where the other Black people lived in LA. They were just being themselves. And even though they might have had some structures or conditions that weren't great, they seemed much more happier and free than she was.
Them season 1 was largely inspired by the Great Migration, which took place between 1916 and 1970, where roughly 6 million Black people fled the Jim Crow South, looking for better career opportunities in the North and West. Some of these places include Compton, where the Emorys went, and Chicago. However, like we saw on the show, they were met with new obstacles that were still very much rooted in racism. And what each of the family members went through in season 1 touched on some aspect of the discrimination they faced, which is what made it so uncomfortable to watch. So the family flees North Carolina for East Compton. This is set in 1953. And Henry Emory secures employment there as the only Black engineer at an aeronautics company. So, of course, he faces workplace discrimination, but even worse, he's haunted by the tap dance man, who we can kind of see coming out through the crack here. The tap dance man may appear as this minstrel performer in blackface, but if you notice, there's a layer of white paint underneath, which is likely because this thing is demonic or some type of spirit. Like what's so offensive about actual minstrelsy, this thing, whatever it is mimicking behaviors or modeling behaviors that it believes will appeal to Henry because he is a Black man. And when we remember that the name Jim Crow actually comes from a very popular minstrel performance back in the day, this character starts to make a lot more sense. For anyone who's like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? In the early 1800s, there was a popular white minstrel performer by the name of Thomas Dartmouth Rice, who would put on blackface and act Black by acting like a buffoon, shucking and jiving, and performing music such as Jump Jim Crow, which is where the name Jim Crow came from. So when Henry first sees the tap dance man, in some aspect, it represents the spirit of the Jim Crow South he thought him and his family were leaving behind when they left North Carolina. Not only does he fear seeing it again in what was supposed to be a new beginning for him and his family, but he fears becoming just like it. I believe that's why the tap dance man really sticks out, as upsetting as the imagery is. Because keep in mind, the rest of the Emory family had their own demons to deal with as well, but there's a lot to unpack there.
I swear to God, I don't care if it was just a movie. You played that part too good. Swear to God, if I ever see this lady. What's up? I don't care if you're old. Swear to God. Cause she really had the nerve to put the little baby in the bag. You disgusting. This scene made me very emotional. Oh, fiend. Oh, snap. She don't even got no teeth, straight gums in her mouth. Swear to God. Stop playing. You really got me mad, like a strong anger. I do not care if you're just an actor. I don't like you in real life. How about that? Play that part way too good. If y'all didn't watch the movie Them on Amazon Prime, go watch it and you'll see what I'm talking about, because that really made me sick to my stomach.
So you want my opinions on the Amazon Prime show Them? Now, I did a review on this before, but it's so far down, I'm gonna just redo it so you don't have to look. I said it then and I said it now, I'm not a fan. The actors did their thing, but only an actor can do so much when your scripts are looking like that. Because a show that advertised themselves by slapping on the Jordan Peele aesthetic and coming behind such critically acclaimed shows like Lovecraft Country, the show was pretty much a wolf in sheep's clothing. It pretended to be one thing, and all we got in the end was trauma. In my personal opinion, a good series has trauma in it, but it is not the foundation of the series. And this one was kind of like, let's pick a new trauma per episode for this Black family that moved into a white neighborhood. And then it's like, also, once they get to healing, once you heal, we're going to unlock a new trauma for you. Then what's the purpose of healing? How are we going to see a character arc then, if they're just going to move up 2 steps to get pushed back 10? And when you have a show whose story foundation is built on trauma, what's the purpose of character development if they're not going to get developed in a positive light? Because good characters are complex.
You know what's so scary about Doris? We know nothing about her backstory. Spoilers for them, Covenant. Doris says things to Ruby like, "You're pretty for a black girl." And Ruby doesn't catch the shade in that, but we do. Doris is just trying to make Ruby feel like she's complimenting her while also lowering her self-esteem, which would make it easier for her to get inside of her head. And when these entities get inside someone's head, they start to see illusions. In Ruby's case, Doris starts small, with lipstick loosening her blouse, but it eventually escalates to Doris tricking Ruby into seeing herself as white. And Ruby's happiness to seeing herself as white shows just how much her self-esteem had been damaged. And understand, Ruby struggled with self-hatred long before she met Doris. This is just something Doris preyed on. Ruby grew up in a society that taught her to hate herself, mostly through her features. Remember, the first time we see Ruby, she's reading a magazine filled with women who fit the white beauty standard. She shares a kiss with Doris that I think has everything to do with the programming in her mind that finds the features on Doris attractive. Similar to what I said about Miss Vera latching on to Lucky's programming, Doris does the same for Ruby. And of course, this all goes back to the beginning when the devil latched onto Hiram's bigoted programming to corrupt his faith and give birth to the Black Hat Man. And that symbiotic relationship reflects how in real life our personal demons latch onto racist programming that we failed to deprogram, and how it leads to our ultimate destruction. And best believe if Doris had succeeded, Ruby would have become her own entity. And because of them, the scare, we know that defeating Doris is just the beginning of Ruby's troubles.
So I watched the show Them this weekend, and here's my opinion. I've been seeing the trailer for season 2 on my timeline of people talking about how good it was. And I ain't really have much going on this weekend, so I decided to watch it. Bruh. See, this is why I don't be the first person to follow the hype. When too many people say something is good, I normally just fall back. But I was bored. Listen, I'm talking to my people here. So if you ain't my people, just sit back, listen, or you can keep scrolling. How many times we gotta keep telling this same old story? The same old trauma, depression, oppression. Why are we so drawn to negative images of our past? This isn't entertainment or entertaining for me. This is just me. This is reliving trauma. This is activating PTSD. This is very intentional and it's unnecessary in 2024. It's so many movies where my people get done dirty by other people, and for some reason, that's entertaining to most of y'all. And this just ain't for the consumers who just watch the shows and movies. The directors and writers getting this smoke too. This my opinion again, but to me, that's selling out. Like, y'all know how popular my people trauma is in Hollywood. So you keep making the same films over and over and over and over and over just to make some money. And I get it. Get to your bag. Make your money. But if you can't find other creative ways to make us shine in different lights, bro, you can save that. And for y'all that's gonna get in the comments and say, well, at the end of season 1, they fought back. Bro, 10 whole episodes and only 1 episode when they decided to do something and fight back. I had to sit there and watch. No, my bad. I take that back. I chose to sit there and watch the whole season. And I only did that to see where all this was going. I was going to end that episode too, but I was curious. I was bored, man. And it went nowhere. The same old song we've been singing since the movie Roots. It's so much more I want to say, but I'm going to sit the rest of this out. I'm going to let y'all have it, but drop me a comment and tell me what you think of that show. If you say don't watch the show, tell me what you think. I'm not watching season 2, so that's that. But y'all get at me later.
Okay, so I watched the first season of a show on Amazon, and it's an Amazon Prime series, and it's called Them. And I had never heard of it, but a second season just came out. So when I saw that there was a second season, I was like, oh, let me check it out. So this show is rated as a horror. However, it's very disturbing. Horror, yes, I would label it as a horror drama. Horror as in like gore and stuff like that. It doesn't really have a lot of, there is some, but not a lot of gore. There is a couple really shocking scenes in this that are like hard to watch. And there's just a lot of subjects that are very hard to watch. However, not like tons of horror, like some of the things you would see. This reminds me sort of like a Get Out, sort of like the way it was filmed, which I really did enjoy. So I'll tell you a little bit about it and you decide if you want to watch it. It is 10 episodes, like every show nowadays, about an hour each. Okay, so you are following the Emery family, and they live, I think it was in North Carolina in the beginning, in this nice house, and it looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. They don't actually tell you, but like when they pan around, I don't see any houses in the area. And they have something horrible pretty much happen to them when they live at this house. Now, some trauma definitely stems from some stuff that happens, and you do actually see it. I just don't want to talk about it, as in, like, I don't want to give anything away. Very disturbing things. It doesn't play out right away. You see that eventually, what happens to them. However, it's a husband and wife. And then they have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. I think the oldest child is 14. And the husband has gone to college, and he's an engineer, and he accepts a job in LA. Well, actually Compton is where they end up living. And so they move from this house to a neighborhood in Compton. Pretty much most of the story plays out in Compton. However, they do flash back to this trauma that happened to them a bunch of times. And it does play a significant part in a lot of things in the show. Okay. So this is a Black family, and when they move to Compton, they move into an all-white neighborhood. This takes place in the 1950s. And although none of this is true, a lot of the things that are happening to these poor people are things that probably have happened to people. I didn't look up exactly everything to see if like these exact things happen to people, but I'm pretty sure for the most part some of these things like happen to people. And listen, the 1950s is a long time ago, but not that long ago. So, we should be ashamed of ourselves. And it's just very, very disturbing that how they moved to this white neighborhood, and they are nothing but nice to people, and they are out of their comfort zone moving to a neighborhood like this. And why shouldn't they be allowed to move to this nice neighborhood? He's an engineer. He has a good job. And they just, this whole neighborhood pretty much, there's a couple people here and there that aren't too bad, but for the most part, this whole neighborhood is determined to get them to leave. I mean, this whole show only takes place, I think, over 10 days. And all of this stuff that happens to them is in a very short period of time, which is just horrendous. And just watching this is just mind-blowing. This whole show is pretty much about race. And just how people can treat another human being is just beyond. I could never treat another human being like some of these people treated people. And I say we've come a long way, but we have. When you watch this, we've come a long way, because this just would never happen because it's so crazy. However, things are still going on that shouldn't be going on either. And this might not be happening, in your neighborhood, but it could still be happening to someone in some other neighborhood in some other way. Maybe not this extreme, but it could be happening. So basically you're following this family and just the horrors that they're going through and how they're being treated. So the husband's going to work and working in this very nice building. But again, he's the only Black person working in this. And, he's very professional about it, but in the back of his mind, you can see that he's having a hard time with it. The wife's a stay-at-home, and she is dealing with the children. So they're going to schools that are predominantly white, and really, it's just hard to watch. Really, they really get treated like crap, and just the teachers alone, how they can be like this. But like I said, this is 1950s. I could never do this, but back then whatever. But like, these kids are being picked on and bullied by other children, and in the end, they get in trouble for disrupting classes. But I guess, the people just didn't know. I don't know. There's no explanation for how you could treat someone like this. None. So basically, you're watching this whole thing play out over these 10 days, and these neighbors trying to get rid of these poor people. I mean, but not only is that happening, because of this trauma that whole family has experienced previous to moving, they have these demons that are like sort of in the background, and at some points it can be a little confusing, these demons. However, as the storyline goes on and on, it all plays out and it all comes together very nicely. And I just thought they did a great job at this. Like I said, it is horror, but it's not really scary to me, besides disturbing. I thought they did a very nice job of the way they showed like these demons and how this trauma kind of affected these people. And I thought it was great. And like I said, it was sort of reminded me of like a Get Out sort of thing, but in a series. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it's disturbing. So definitely take that into account when you decide you want to watch it. I will do a review on the second season. So we'll see how that goes. I'm pretty sure that it's completely different people in the second season. But yeah, so if you want to watch it, it's called Them, and it's on Amazon Prime. And like I said, the second season just came out, so it should be like pretty prominent because of the second season. But I did really enjoy it, so check it out.
So here's Betty's backstory. Spoilers for Them Covenant. Betty came from money. However, her father Otto had been inappropriate with her growing up. Betty's mother Ethel knew this, didn't step in, and even blamed Betty for what Otto had been doing to her. So, when Betty married her husband and they moved to East Compton, it was supposed to be a new start for her. And she became obsessed with cleanliness, likely because what happened to her in her youth made her feel unclean. When the Emery family moved across the street, she saw them as a threat to her clean safe haven. And she compared the idea of more black families coming to a mold growth. Even saying something like, no matter how hard you scrub at a mold growth, you can't get it out once it starts. This is all stemming from her obsessive cleanliness, stemming from what she went through. Plus, Betty's husband doesn't make enough money for them to move out of East Compton, which is ultimately why she returns home to ask her parents for money. And when Betty shows up, everyone is surprised to see her, the maid and both her parents. Her mother is unkind, but eventually leaves. Otto starts to write the check, but he wants Betty to stay the night and offers to draw her a bath. Betty smiles like she always does, but tries to get out of it. It's obvious at this point that Otto expects her to do something for this money. And as he's drawing a bath for his daughter, mind you, he starts getting undressed next to the tub. And Betty, sitting on the bed, looks like she's disassociating before she ultimately decides some things just aren't worth the money and leaves. Instead of just embracing the change of having black families come in, Betty rides even harder to get them out because in her mind, this clean safe haven is all she has. And really, it's so little in the grand scheme of what she wants, which is security in her marriage, passion to be returned to it, and a child of her own. As much as I hate this character, her backstory is absolutely heartbreaking. Alison Pill did her thing.
This show kind of reminds me a lot of Jordan Peele's Us, because it does show like how the Black family can deal with so many challenges, not only within itself, but societal, etc., and how those pressures can like make you sometimes question yourself or just challenge the dynamic. So I thought it was a really interesting show. I haven't finished the second season, but I think I'll watch it. It seems like it's progressing into like another decade or two. And so I'm really interested to see what'll happen. What do you all think? Have you seen this? Let me know down below. And thank you so much for listening to Books and Looks TV. I'll see y'all next time.